My name is Ashley Archer. I use she, her pronouns. My graduation year is 2017. I graduated from the Organizational Development and Leadership Program, master's program. I'm currently employed at Drexel University, and I am the Associate Director for Student Life Curriculum and Staff Development. So my current role is pretty exciting. If I had to really pinpoint or boil it down to what it is, I kind of just develop our leadership opportunities for not only our students, but our professional staff. So that can look like lunch and learns for our professional staff on what is next steps after Drexel, or like what is your passion areas, or it can look like for our students, what is it to mean to run an effective meeting, delegate, time for our student organization leaders. How can you make this transferable for your resume? Thinking about problem areas or areas of concern that we're seeing and trying to really just fill gaps. The path is different, right? So I think about paths like they're winding roads. Like the journey is interesting. So for me, I actually went to Temple for undergrad. So when I got to undergrad, I was a bio major, wanted to be a doctor, and was like, yeah, I'm gonna be an OBGYN, right? Then recognized that like wasn't for me. Switched to our business school with the intention of really being a lawyer. But I also became a resident assistant on campus, which opened up this whole world of community development, people like relationship orients, and recognizing that that's where I felt more comfortable was within higher ed. So I did it during undergrad, and a lot of my mentors, who I'm really still close to today, I found them through residence life. They were either my hall directors or just senior leaderships within the division, and talked about how I could do this full time, right? I didn't think that higher ed was even a career until I met people. So that is where my path kind of started. Then I went to St. Joe's and became a hall director. So shout out to Soren if it's still there, and Landon and Rashford. Those are the halls that I managed while I was there, and also just got my degree for free. So recognizing that like this was a path to not only get a degree for free, recognizing as someone who is a first generation college student, that's a lot of money I didn't have to pay. So that was a typical path. So then after that, I went over to Drexel as an assistant director, was able to use my love for higher education and also diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially around gender and sexuality, to not only manage a couple of our buildings here, but also implement some curriculum for diversity and inclusion. So, but how did I get here? My master's degree at St. Joe's really propelled me forward as an ODL graduate, especially in adult psychology. I was able to just learn the skills to figure out how teams work, how to help teams do better, how to implement change. And that's what I'm doing a lot within my current role, is implementing change and strategic planning for not only our division, but our students too. For higher ed, especially this student affairs area, it is very important to be flexible. You never know. Like I said, my job is exciting. It's never a dull moment here. So like while I might have 45 things to do, if a student is outside and has a concern or is in some kind of crisis, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and make sure they're okay and then come back. So like really having that flexibility, having some kind of interpersonal skills with folks, so understanding how to build relationships, how to inquire about people, and also understanding just how to strategically think forward. Something that I really got from St. Joe's, and I always reference this class to this day, I had a creative problem solving class in grad school. So Dr. Cervantes taught it. And it taught me just how to creatively problem solve, think out of the box, right? So how to take something and, figure out, all right, what's the next steps? What is not typical to solve this problem? So really being creative is probably what I do a lot on my daily basis. So this role is super new. So I'm building the plan as I'm flying. So I'm building curriculum. I'm also building out this role. And I'm also seeing things in our division that I can fix based off of just the stuff I've learned at St. Joe's. Definitely be involved. The way I got into residence life is that I was a student org leader. I started a student organization at Temple. When I was there, I saw a need and just said, well, let's fix it. Just really being proactive, kind of a self-starter. Those are some kind of things we need. It is motivation, is to kind of help people, recognizing a higher ed is different than other places, but it's still like a pretty great place to work. But definitely being involved and just getting outside of classes. So, because academics are very important, but they also look for what are your extracurriculars? How are you being well-rounded outside of the classroom? And that is what really has prepared a lot of people, especially myself, who work in higher ed, to just be successful. But our students come to us, our students are asking for how do they get involved? Like how do I get connected to community? I'm feeling homesick. How do I find my place on campus? But if you have not lived that experience or somehow developed that own experience for yourself and navigated it, it's really hard to then help someone else navigate that journey. Think about your network and just don't make it transactional. It should always be two-sided, right? So making sure that you're also pouring into your network as much as you want to pour in your network to pour into you. That doesn't mean you have to talk to your network every single day. It can be things like, for me, what I try to do is I'll reach out to people like once a month, to check in, see how they're doing. So always building that relationship and leaning on your network when you need them. Ask about skills or like what areas that you can improve. I know like my mentors are really good about giving me feedback around, all right, so something that you do well. All right, how can we take this and then make it even better, right? How can we make sure that we're always developing you, whether it's personally or professionally? So really finding your network that can do both for you, and leaning really into them. Something I also think about with your network is that you never know where you're meeting people. So always just treat people the same. You never know if it's the person at the front desk or if it's the person in the back office. They all can give you some kind of just reward or value. And that's what I found at St. Joe's, is making connections with our security staff, our housekeeping staff. To this day, those folks have helped me outside of my role to find just skills or things to be appreciative of. So always never stop. Your network is not in one lane. It is different. So just be open to what your network can do. As a Black woman, but I'm also masculine presenting, I'm also a part of the LGBTQ community, there is some different levels of just oppressions or just areas I do have to navigate. So some barriers always for me is like imposter syndrome. So the higher I get into my career, right? So I'm always thinking about, all right, so am I supposed to be in this role? Yes, you're supposed to be in this role, right? I have 2 degrees. I have a degree from St. Joe's, right? And all my experience have prepared me for this role. But it's like, how do I definitely combat, the feelings of not being adequate, right? So you're supposed to be here. You're valid. If you are given the role, like it's because folks trust you, and that is what I'm always thinking about to combat that imposter syndrome. There's always the idea of, especially for being a Black woman, sometimes being the only person in the room that looks like myself. So having to not only advocate for folks that look like me, but also try to teach others that don't look like me why it is necessary that I must advocate for either a student experience or a staff experience. So recognizing there's always that area of learning and also educating if you want to do that. Other barriers of experience, there's always the respectability politics of like, and if folks are not clear with respectability politics, it's kind of the idea of like, if you do this thing, then you will be accepted in society, right? But if you don't do this thing, then you're open to, just kind of this judgment or not being accepted because you're not fitting the mold. So, I mean, as someone who has grown up their entire life recognizing that respectability policy is a thing, living authentically in a workplace is sometimes can circumvent that respectability politics, but it's okay because now it's just creating a path for people who look like me, to be their authentic selves, whether you just want to be in our area chilling out. For me, you just live authentically. So those are some barriers. Thinking about systemic inequalities, always recognizing that there's systems at play and being aware of what systems are always at play so that you can understand them and figure out how to navigate them to your best ability. And always taking care of yourself, like mental health wise and self-care wise too. There's a bunch. So it just depends on where you are and you want to do. So some stuff that I found really helpful when I started into my career was McCuho, which was the Mid-Atlantic Conference of Housing Officers. So they are just in the Pennsylvania, Jersey, like this region here. But they do conferences. They do student conferences, or they do something called a student staff living conference where you can learn about, programming, learn about marketing, how like transferable skills. Those conferences really helped me not only network, but also be prepared about, okay, so what is higher ed? What is this field that higher ed is, right? What are the things I can do in higher ed? Is it just, can I not only, do I have to just manage a residence hall, right? Can I go to HR, right? Recognizing that like there's different platforms that I can take. Just because I'm in higher ed doesn't mean I'm teaching. I can, again, I can be HR, you can do a lot of other things too outside of just the typical higher ed experience. Other things I recommend is NASPA, which is like our national just professional organization. So it's not just for residence life. It's for folks who just are interested in higher education in general. You'll see people who are deans, associate vice presidents there, being more engaged around leadership tables, round tables, folks who are just movers and shakers within their universities and their respective institutions. If you're an undergrad and you're looking to get involved in that, there is something called NUF Fellows, NUFF, where they actually will sponsor you to go to one of their conferences and do some leadership development that way too. So especially for our students who are marginalized, first generation, this could be a really good opportunity just to experience all that higher ed has to offer. I think for me, just telling like me is like it's gonna work out, and that that with your master's degree, you don't have to do just one thing, and that is super transferable to anything. And that trusting the skills that you've learned in the ODO program and trying to just be strategic about how you use them. I think another thing that I would have benefited from is recognizing that use your network and use your experiences. Just because use the experience that if you worked at an ice cream shop in high school, that counts as some kind of work experience, and that counts as something that you can use with you to this day. So for example, I worked at Kmart, rest in peace to the big K, in undergrad and in high school. And just those skills I learned there, I've even taken to my job currently to this day. So never forget where you're coming from and the things you've learned, because they can always help you in your path forward, but you never know until you get there.